The Drum Candy podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into episode 35 of the Drum Candy podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This week's guest is my good friend, Brendan Buckley. Brendan is a first call drummer for many top artists, most notably with Shakira, and more recently with Farrell and Morrissey. So in this episode, I want to focus primarily on building the rigs for those different artists and then what the expectations are. And then we go into our usual tangential conversations. Let's get to it. Brendan Buckley. All right, I'm going to fire away. So first question, most importantly, who would win in a street fight? A semi-pro boxer or a semi-pro jiu-jitsu martial artist?
That's a serious question?
That's a serious question.
All right, semi-pro boxer, semi-pro what? Jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so not world class where they're doing, elite level. Just a trained fighter, boxer, or a jiu-jitsu.
All right, this might offend some people, but I would say I'd put my money on the jiu-jitsu guy. Yeah. I would say the boxer has a good chance in the first 15 seconds to get a couple really good shots and knock out the guy if he gets him on the jaw. But if it goes any longer than that, the jiu-jitsu guy would definitely close the distance and wear the guy down. I think it's two different styles, so it's a matchup issue, but I think there are more weapons that a semi-pro jiu-jitsu guy can deploy as opposed to a semi-pro boxer.
Have you been in a street fight?
I have.
Did you win?
I was in a street fight once where I was mugged by a gang of people, and and we stalemated, so I think I won.
Okay.
It was like me versus 7, and the fact that nothing happened and that we broke even, I'm like, I'll take that as a win.
What was your move? How did you posture up on him?
Oh no, I was so shocked, actually. I didn't even know what was going on. I'm like, what are these guys messing with me, or are they trying to rob me? I mean, I was like, I live in this cloud where this stuff doesn't happen ever. I'm like, oh yeah. And so I got jumped in New York City, and I was like, what's going on? What are these guys? Why are they trying to grab my phone out of my hand? Is this a prank? And then I'm like, oh no, this is for real. They're swinging at my face. So I actually just dragged a couple of the dudes into 8th Avenue, and we started fighting in the middle of the street. And
Holy cow.
And then they all just ran into a subway station.
That doesn't sound real, but I guess anything's possible in New York.
It didn't feel real. It wasn't until like a minute later where honestly, where I don't know, the adrenaline wore off, and I was like, what just happened? That's not at all like an Avengers movie.
Did you keep your phone though? Is the most important.
Yes. And my friend was on the phone the whole time. He was like, oh my God. Yeah.
All right. So are you still training?
Yeah, I am.
What is your training regimen these days?
Well, I go to this martial arts academy that has classes all day long, every day. And you can do kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, you can do yoga, you can do CrossFit if you want there. So I normally go about 4 days a week, and I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu there. And I'll do maybe 1 day of kickboxing. And any day that I'm not going there, I usually go to Gold's Gym. You can tell by these pythons that I'm holding here that I'm just such a fitness geek. No, I mean, I don't know where all that exercise goes, but I don't look like an Adonis here. But I do like to. I mean, I think I like to use my body, so it's like use it or lose it. Drums are very physical. We all know that as you go from 16 to 26 to 36, you just start to feel weird aches and pains when you sit behind the drums. So I'm trying to, reverse the aging process by staying as flexible and fit as I can. And I think I try to exercise every day. I either go to the martial arts academy or I go to the gym, and probably a nice mixture of both keeps me from breaking down. I think if I went 7 days a week going full on combat, I'd also probably be in the hospital.
Why did you pick jiu-jitsu? What was that appeal?
The appeal was originally good question. I would tour, and on bigger pop tours, you have security guards with you, traveling with you. And I thought it was just so funny that they were the exact opposite of me. Like just personality wise, body type wise, I'm like a goofy string bean, and these guys were really big, serious dudes. So I would mess with them on tour. I'd like, like I would just jump them just for fun and see what they did. And I was always amazed by like the actual technique behind self-defense, not just a bunch of bouncers, like, punching a guy in the face, but the actual technique that exists with physics and leverage to self-defense. And I was like, show me that. The same way if someone did a really cool lick on the drums, I'd be like, hey, what sticking is that? I would do the same thing if someone had my wrist in a weird position. I'm like, man, that's crazy. What is that? And so I remember getting off of a tour and going and taking some self-defense classes because I said, I don't know any of this stuff. And I went, I took some self-defense classes. It was mind blowing, like opened my eyes to all this stuff that I didn't know. I found it fascinating. So I just kept on going and taking different martial arts. I studied Kempo karate for a while, kickboxing, like Muay Thai kickboxing. And then I started studying jiu-jitsu also. And that's really fun because if people who don't know the differences, jiu-jitsu is a grappling martial art, which is more like wrestling with submission holds. So you wrestle until you get a dominant position and you can make the other guy say uncle. So that's how it works. And what's interesting about that martial art is that, well, maybe two or three things. One, the permutations are endless. There are so many combinations of moves depending on the scenario. So really get your brain buzzing, like in a chess way. They call it physical chess, because depending on what the guy does, there are 8 variables and it just keeps on building like that exponentially. So by the end of a class, your mind is like buzzing in a strange way that it's hard to sleep at night because you're thinking about all these options. And two is it doesn't look like it, but it's one of the safer ways to spar and to train, because they take out a lot of you're not supposed to punch or kick your partner in the face in jiu-jitsu. You can in a street fight, but in the class, you're not allowed to do that. It's all just wrestling and grappling and getting the guy to say, tap, I quit. And then you restart. So that way you can kind of simulate a real fight without the damage. Other martial arts, you actually kind of have to punch and kick each other. And there's a lot of black eyes and bloody noses. And I've done that too. And I'm kind of tired of that. So I've tried to find a martial art that I can do and age well, And so
do they know that you're a musician or a drummer, and do you tell them, hey, don't break my wrists? I mean,
yeah, I do. A lot of the responsibility starts with me going to class and not being a meathead and not being an aggro idiot and just flopping around like a spaz. I make sure that I'm very careful, graceful, loose, patient. And I also am very careful with my limbs, and I'm careful with my partner. And it's strange. The better you get at it, the more people just mirror your own level of aggression and style. So if you're there, super chill, super peaceful, like I'm just here to train and to learn, you kind of get that energy back. But if someone comes in like a bully and starts throwing people around and being a little too aggressive, people respond with that type of energy too, and it escalates. So, yeah, it's one part you have to pick good partners that aren't going to, really clumsily hurt you. But it's another part is you have to explain to them this is who I am. I'm not a UFC fighter. I'm here for the fun of it and for the fitness. Try not to go berserker on me. Funny, right? You got to come to a class with me someday.
No, because I'll be the one that would get fired up and end up getting my arm broken or something.
It's a learning experience to not like just go there immediately. To not go like, oh boy, you have to relax. Yeah.
The one time I had a wrestling match with my longest best friend, he tried to rip my ear off and I tried to choke him out. So we were like, okay, we'll never do this again.
It escalates, and it's nature. It's nature. Like, if you ever see two puppies playing together or two baby, panda bears, they're basically doing jiu-jitsu. You see, it's kind of cute, and it's play, but that's what they do. They roll around. They're like biting each other and smacking each other, and that's a form of learning and playing for babies of all throughout nature. And then I feel like kids have that too. I don't know, in a sandbox or whatever, playing with their parents. I wrestle with my kid all the time. Pick them up in the air, throw them on the mattress, and then you get to a certain age where that's just not acceptable. If you go anywhere near there, that's actually a fight at that point. You're entering my personal space, and now we're going to blows. Fisticuffs. So it's fun to have an adult version of that. An adult version of, pandas, smacking each other around, but it's a controlled, agreed version of this. And it's kind of biologically satisfying in a weird way.
Mm-hmm. So I noticed when you play, no matter who you're playing with, whether it's arenas or club dates, whatever, you have a pretty chill approach to the gig. Is this a result of training, or is that just the kind of the way you are as a player? I feel like you're very relaxed, controlled, elevate when you need to, but I don't ever see like headbanging or crazy stuff like that.
I think it's more who I am, and it's my personality a lot. It's my technique. Believe me, I was a drummer in the 90s, and I used to hit harder than anyone I knew. And I used to bash drums and bash cymbals and bash snare drum heads and rim shots and break sticks. But that, 1992 to 1998, that was how you had to play to get a gig in a band. You had to be, Rage Against the Machine or, Nirvana level drumming. And I used to play that way all day long. Pop acts, top 40 acts. I was going for it, And, but then I started, I don't want to think it's age. It's just more maturity than age. I thought, is this the best approach? Does it sound good, or does it just feel good or look good? Am I getting good tone? Am I getting good feel, good pocket? Am I getting consistency? All these things, other qualities of drumming started to come into play. Am I playing relaxed and efficiently? Am I using my limbs correctly? And I think it was a slow journey from that person, that caveman that I was for a while, into being a drummer that I like the way I sound better now than I did back then. And a lot of bashing and a lot of head banging is cool. It's energetic. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't always sound that good. If you close your eyes and listen, you're like, I can often hear someone's body motion in their beat. Like if they swing their arms like from the ceiling to the drums, or if they're really swaying forward and back or really swaying side to side, sometimes I close my eyes and I can hear it in the pocket. I'm like, ooh, wow. If they just moved maybe 30% less, it would groove way harder. There's something about the extraneous motion that's affecting the pocket and the consistency. And then you talk about what everyone knows, that, depending on how hard you hit the drums or the cymbals, that affects how they sound under microphones. So if I'm just smashing a snare drum, that's fun and it's one sound, but does that sound good with that close mic SM57 on the top head? Or does it just sound like just garbage?
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the room mics, it might sound pretty cool, but the close mics, I don't know. So you start to learn how to play the mics, and you start to learn how to, what's it called? Your internal dynamics between different drums. And you start to pre-mix yourself. And those things affect the way you play also. And on top of all that, we're talking about the biomechanics of drumming. And I do like a looser style and with very little tension. I do like good posture, so I'm not leaning a lot, putting weight over any certain portion of the kit. I do like, proper motion, good posture, good balance, good dynamics. So it's everything. And I don't think it came from martial arts. I think it came from more just my personality and the way I like to approach the drum set.
Now, how does that translate in the studio? That makes sense. You can not worry about the visual, but when you're playing big stages with a crowd that's a half a mile back, how do you then incorporate the visual element without it becoming some sort of compensation, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I don't mind big motions. I don't mind stick spinning. I don't mind all that stuff as long as I'm not compromising the feel, the groove, or the sound. I years ago took out, I don't mind it as being an extra on top, the icing on the cake. Because I used to study molar technique, and I love my crashes are they're like gigantic bullwhip crashes normally, like live. But I only do that if it makes sense musically. I think my ego is in check now, where I don't feel like I need to impress people by looking cool anymore. Mm-hmm. Maybe I did when I was 21, but 23, but I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like I want to impress people by sounding really good. Mm-hmm. I want the drums to sound like, a freight train. I don't want it to sound like you're rolling a drum set down a staircase, but it looks really cool. I want it to sound solid and impressive, impactful. And on top of that, if I feel inspired to hop off my drum throne or smash some crash cymbals or something, that's cool. I usually play with a 16 and an 18-inch floor tom on my side, and every now and then I lean to 3 o'clock and I bash the toms, because it feels good. Wow! but I'm not. But that's an effect, like kaboosh. I'm not going to sit there and just bash open hi-hats and rim shots just randomly because it really looks amazing. Swinging these big circular motions over my head, because then I think I don't know. Am I focusing on the time, or am I focusing on how cool it looks to whip my arms around? And so I do understand that a live show is 50% visual. That's why they have video walls, and that's why they have pyro and confetti, because a live show is about that also. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to deny that and say that I'm going to be up there and play like a statue. I'm going to be the world's boringest drummer on the planet. I don't want to be that, but I want to also stay true to my philosophy of drumming, which is, sound and feel first, and visuals second. That's all.
So is the approach you come to like a tour? You're preparing for a tour, practicing on your own, and then when you get the rehearsals, and then when you get to the first show, is your presentation consistent, or does the intensity start to ramp up a bit?
It usually ramps up. Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. Normally what I do is I get music sent to me, email, MP3s, and I write out charts, and I memorize songs, and I come up with approaches that might work. A, B, or C might be a good way to do this live. Then we get to rehearsals. We learn everything. We get it going. And then the more you play it, the more fun it gets to, give it an extra 15%. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, that's a good thing to think about also, is that the second you finish your last rehearsal and you play it in front of an audience, you're going to naturally amp it up. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, ladies and gentlemen, and you play the first concert. It's almost like you have to tell yourself to hold back a little bit, because you're going to start hitting harder. You're going to start breathing worse. You're going to start pushing the tempo, even if it's the click track. I'm just a little bit more on top of the beat than I was during the rehearsals. So I have techniques to handle that too. Like I make sure I take a lot of deep breaths when I'm playing live. Like before every verse, before every chorus, I just take a huge deep breath and okay, verse 2, here we go, chorus 2. And that way I'm always, making sure I'm taking a nice deep breath and staying relaxed. I do this thing where I lean back literally on the drum throne. If I feel like I'm playing tense or on top of the beat, I physically lean back a little bit and play, it feels like you're leaning 45 degrees backwards off the throne, but you're not. You're actually just sitting up.
Right.
If you ever like look at yourself in the mirror, your leaning back is actually up. And what you think is straight is usually like, 70 degrees forward or something.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm playing, I'm like, man, it just doesn't feel as good today as it did yesterday. I take a deep breath and I lean back a little bit, and all of a sudden the whole pocket of the whole band comes together a little better. And that's something I do. But yeah, and it's actually fun to go a little crazy live. It's fun. I don't want to be like a clinical technician up there. I want to have fun. I grew up listening to punk rock music and heavy metal, so I don't want to just be up there executing drum parts to perfection. I want to do that. I want to do that, but have fun too. And I want other people to have fun,
Yeah.
And I want the band members to have fun too.
Do you have a pre-show ritual or routine that you do every time?
Not fixed, but I do have. I'm a very routine kind of guy. So depending on the tour and the scenario, it's probably a whole day process. It's probably like, got to find a good cup of coffee early in the morning and get a healthy breakfast, go to the gym, do a little cardio, stretch. I like stretching a lot. I don't do a full hour and a half of yoga, but I'll stretch. And then I do like warming up my hands and my feet on a pad. Like I'll just do some pad work, but also make sure I'm warming up my thighs, calves and ankles and toes and things like that on the floor. I like hopping up and down. It sounds ridiculous, but like something like a jump rope, it helps, because anything that gets your whole body moving and not just your shoulder to your fingertips, because drumming isn't, people think that if I just play on a drum pad, I'm ready to play a show, but really you've just warmed up like 15% of your body. Everything else has to be warmed up too. So I like anything that makes me feel like my whole body is ready to go. I like having a decent dinner, but way before the show, like 5 or 6 o'clock, not 8 or 9 o'clock. And I like hanging with the musicians that I'm about to share a stage with, in the dressing room or just, some camaraderie. So it's not just we're all in separate bunks on a bus, playing with our iPhones, and then we go on stage and play a concert and pretend like we're a family. I like it to actually be a real family where we're hanging out for an hour or two, joking around, and maybe on the Shakira tour, we're such a family that we make it an entire pre-show and post-show party. Like the dressing room, we're DJing, everyone's hanging out, we're playing ping pong together, and like the whole thing, it's from 5 o'clock to midnight. It's an entire thing we're doing together. It's not like we just have that 9 to 11 on stage and we all separate. Everyone's hanging out and eating dinner together. So, because I play with a lot of different artists and each band's a little different, I can't take the same scenario each time, but I know what makes me comfortable. I know what I'm there to do. And my number one job is to play the drums well, and to make everyone else on stage really comfortable. So that's my first objective. Everything else is secondary. I can be very flexible.
Do you think about the music once you're in a run on the road? Do you think about the music anymore, or do you try to not think about it when you're not on stage? Like, do you go back and review tapes, or do you replay things that you could have done better in your mind? That usually plagues me, the one mistake. It's like, all right, I'm going to be thinking about that for the next 24 hours. Or do you try to just forget about it?
I do rethink things. I don't like to think a lot on stage. I think my approach to playing music is you do a lot of the thinking in the rehearsals or the practice sessions, and you kind of go up on stage like a zombie, and you just clear your mind and just go. And then the next day you can do some critical analysis again. But I don't sit on stage saying, oh, that was a little head, that was behind. Oh, maybe I should tune my snare drum higher. Oh, maybe, I don't know about that. I don't do that throughout the show. That'll just drive you crazy. And then you're playing at a C- level because your brain is somewhere else. I like to think about, just relaxing, clearing the mind, and just go, just shoot the firing pistol, and just go. And then when the show's over, you can either that night or the next day, you can talk about how it went and maybe some observations you have, like maybe this song isn't working the way it should, or maybe I can come up with a better drum fill going from here to here, or maybe the dynamics aren't working on this section. But that's stuff that could be handled not in the actual performance of the show. And, but yeah, I think there's always some room for improvement. So I like to analyze and kind of like almost like there's a statue and you're kind of just, sanding it a little bit here and buffing it there. I think even if the song is really great, maybe we can take it just a little bit higher, And sometimes I think maybe my drum approach could be a little bit better, or the fills, or the sonically, I work a lot with engineers, the front house engineer. How are we doing with that kick drum sound? How's that snare drum sound holding up? And that kind of stuff. How are the levels coming out of the electronics? Do you need any EQ differently? And so, yeah, I tweak the whole time.
Are you MDing on most of these gigs?
Some, but not all. But what happens is if you're a drummer, whether you're the MD or not, you often get asked to do a lot of MD type things. I think it's something about the position of your job position is, I often do all the tempos. I often do all the count offs. I do cue all the endings. I often get asked to put together the set lists. I often run the tracks. So these are a lot of MD things. There are some MD things that I don't like doing, is like handling record labels and management, those kind of things. Coddling the artist when they want to maybe jump off a roof. You're like, why don't you go handle the artist? I'll go fix the Ableton, So it's good to have like a duo when you're MDing, I think, to have more of the technical guy and more of the emotional guy. And I like kind of being more the technical guy that makes sure everything's solid for the show. And then there's someone else who's going to go argue with management about the pay cut or something.
That leads me into the next topic. What do you feel, what's kind of a two-parter, what do you think you brought to the table before you had any gigs that gave you the first break? And then what do you feel are essential to be on your level now, skill-wise?
What
do you think got you your first gig? What was it? Or what things? And then what things do you now know that are essential to be first call touring drummer?
They might overlap a bunch, but let me think. A lot of my first breaks were when I was living in Miami. I went to music school down there and I worked down there for a while. And I started playing with different bands and producers and doing tours out of Miami. And I think probably the qualities I had at the time were versatility, stylistically being, I could play pop, rock, Latin, jazz, singer-songwriter stuff. It's not just I studied it. I actually enjoy listening to different styles of music and enjoy studying the drummers that excel at the different styles of music. Mm-hmm. I like a really good pop drummer. I like a really good fusion drummer. I like a really good jazz drummer. And so I think I don't phone it in on certain styles of music. I look at what makes, Carlos Vega amazing and what makes, Brian Blade amazing and all that kind of stuff. And I think my organization and preparation is probably also a quality that helped me out a lot when I was younger, because musicians can be just knuckleheads. And, so if you can just kind of keep it together, you'll automatically rise just one level up. Like, I didn't do anything special, but I showed up with my bass drum pedal. So that was a plus, I did not forget my stick bag, and I actually learned the songs prior to the gig. I don't know why that was a big thing, but those things got me the gig. So I think those are some things, like just thinking about those things early on, helped me a bunch. I had aspirations to be a freelance session drummer before I even knew what that was. I think about it like how much I idolized Omar Hakim when I was a kid. That I bought Sting's Dream of the Blue Turtle on LP, and I was listening to these drum parts like, oh man, I'm a huge Stuart Copeland fan, and I love this new drummer too. Who is this guy? Then I found out this is the same guy with David Bowie, with Miles Davis, with Weather Report. I'm like, how is this guy playing with so many artists? John Schofield. And I thought that was just so cool that he could do all these styles of music and do it convincingly. And so probably before I even knew that was an actual job, I just liked that idea of someone who was professional and stylistically diverse enough to do, a plethora of gigs. So I think maybe I had that in my head of trying to be that kind of guy before I even knew what it was. So yeah, those are some of the qualities I think helped me early on. And I think now, your question was, how do you keep a gig or how do you work now?
Well, I think like if you had, let's say you had to hire somebody to replace you, what would be the non-negotiables you have to do to be able to do this, this, and this?
Oh, well, I do have a roster of subs here in Los Angeles. And yeah, so I do think about this stuff often. And it depends on the gig. Sometimes I think this guy is perfect for this gig. This guy's perfect for that gig. But one is how able are they to learn the music perfectly? Are they going to be one of those kind of guys who's like, I checked out the grooves, I think I got it. I'm like, that's not going to work, because that's going to be a lot of headaches for the rest of the guys explaining, hey, there's a break here. Hey, you actually drop out for this verse. I want a musician who's saying that's important. When you have someone sub for you, it can be a problem. It can be a money loss. If they have to rehearse a guy for a week and it's your fault because you double book yourself or you have to split, it's a problem. So I like to have subs who can just walk in, sit down, and sound like me or a better version of me, so someone that could come in, they have the sounds dialed in, they have a great feel and pocket, and they learn songs. Learning songs is big for me. And then on top of that, having a really good attitude. They're not going to get in there and be Mr. Negative and complain about how terrible the lunch was or how they don't like the temperature on the bus. And there's a lot of whining that musicians can do, and I get it. Gigging can be, very trying at times, but just hold that in a little bit. Rein in your inner monologue a little bit and just make it through the week or the month or whatever. So those are the qualities that most of my friends have is they have just great sounds, great feels. They can nail a click track, and they really learn material.
Sounds simple enough, but that's high level stuff. Like
because I sub for a lot of friends, so I know what works well, and what they want is, hey man, can you cover for me? I'm like, sure. And what they really want is someone who's going to show up, and basically the artist, the band, and the management won't even notice that the other guy's missing. That's how good you want it to be. So they show up, they sit down and go, oh my God, there's a different drummer. I'm like, don't worry. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And the gig goes flawlessly. You leave. You look great. The friend looks great that subbed you in. He's like, wow, that guy you sent did a great job. You're like, yep. So you have this little group of comrades who all do that for one another. And then, you look like a solid team.
Do you, how do you prepare a sub? Do you send them video, board tapes, charts? I mean, how do you prepare? How do you prepare a sub, and how do you prepare as a sub?
I prepare a sub depending on how, once again, I hate to say it, but depending on the gig. But usually I'll ask them what makes them comfortable. Do they want my charts? Do they want to write out their own charts? Do they want me to, GoPro a live show and then send them the video? So I'll do all of that. For certain gigs where I know the artist is just, for lack of a better term, picky, that I will say, like, you know what, hey, can we get together once? And I'll actually go over the guy's studio and I'll go through, all 15 songs. Like, yeah, actually it's this. And actually, it actually goes like this. And you're the one who dictates this section. And you got to watch for this, because this part is open and the singer's going to go like this. And then you're back in again, and whatever. Just, help them out with cues. Cues are something that people take for granted. I sub for a lot of people on gigs. I learn all the songs. I'm like, I got this. I get to the first sound check, and I didn't realize that so many things are cued off of like things on stage. I go, when I go like this, then we do this. When the singer goes like this, then we do this. I'm like, well, this is something I could not gauge from all the live recordings, that everything is based on cues. And I wish someone would have told me that. But so again, I don't want to bombard a sub with too much info and then freak them out. So I'll say, what makes you comfortable, and what can I do to make this seamless for you? And vice versa. When I sub for someone, I say, give me all the material. You don't have to give me charts. I'll write out my own charts. And then I often go to YouTube and look for as many live performances as I can, because those are more telling than the album versions. You watch it live and you're like, oh, the guitar solo is twice as long. This is 3 BPM faster than it is on the album. They do a total unison Frank Zappa ending for this one song that I didn't know about. And or they medley this. These two songs are actually a medley. And so I try to get as many live YouTube videos under my belt. Sometimes I'll watch several. If the artist has several drummers over the years, I'll watch all of them to see how the approach changed throughout the drummers. That's fun for me. Just like, oh, I like it. This guy in the 90s did it this way. This guy in the aughts did it this way. And the more recent guy plays it this way. And that's it. And I ask a lot about the artist. I ask a lot about, what do they like? How are they with stage volume? Do they like loud drums? Do they like quiet drums? Do they hate drums? Do you have to be almost invisible? There are artists who you're there, but they don't want to hear you or something. Or do they need to feel the drums? How are they with tempos? Do they let the drummer just do whatever they want? Or do they count off a song and then turn around and give you the stink eye all night? The singer who counts off the song and then blames you for it being too fast. You're like, dude, you counted it off.
Yeah, but I've had a lot of those behind the back, like swirling finger speed up, like, no,
stomping their feet. Like, don't drag. You're like, well, count it off correctly. But that's, so you ask, like, so how are they with tempos? How are they with dynamics? How are they, do they want interaction, or do they want to not even look at the band? They just want to, stare at the audience. So those things help. I don't know. It's fun. I love subbing because I feel like it's flying by the seat of your pants, like putting all of your skills together into one night. Like everything I've trained for is coming together right now.
It's like a street fight.
It's fun. Yeah, like a street fight. Sometimes I lose, sometimes I win.
Well, we got to talk about gear. This is a podcast that's all about gear, so this could take a while, maybe.
I love it.
First question, because all of your kits seem to be custom built per gig in a way. So, first of all, what is your home base kit? Like, what if you're just going to play drums? What is it most often?
My favorite setup, even though all of my drum sets look different, they all come from the same blueprint, which is a 22-inch kick drum, 14-inch snare drum, 13-inch rack, 16-inch floor tom, and 18-inch floor tom. So I like 1 up, 2 down, 22, 14-inch snare drum. I often like a secondary snare drum to the left side of my hi-hat. The size and pitch depends on the style of music. I like hi-hat, ride cymbal, probably a left and a right crash. I'll start with that. And then everything else builds from there, depending on the gig. Yeah. And I'm a DW endorser, and I usually start with, actually, doesn't matter really. I'll play anything that they have. Sometimes the collector's maple. I like the jazz. I like, I had a, what is that called? A performance series with Tegan and Sarah. I had, I have an acrylic. I have a stainless steel. So I don't know, but that's my go-to setup.
How do you pick which one goes on the road, or is that a different situation?
Visual. Visual. I usually ask either the artistic director or the artist if they have a color in mind. And for instance, I did a tour last fall with Morrissey, and I asked them, do I need to build a kit for this tour with the guys at DW, or can I use one that I already own? And they said, well, just send him, here's his email, send him every kit you own and he'll pick one. I'm like, all right.
Okay.
So I took photos of every kit I had and sent it to him, and he sent back like the stainless steel, please. I love it. And I'm like, okay, great. So that's it. So he picked it. But sometimes it's sonic, but I feel like I can get a decent sound out of most of my drums. So I don't think so much about the sound, like, oh my God, for this tour, this is totally an acrylic drum set tour. That's more a visual thing, you know? I don't think, oh my God, this tour is totally mahogany and this one's poplar. I feel like as a drummer, you should be able to tune well enough to get a decent sound out of all of your drums.
Do you tune differently for like a big stage tour versus a small club or a session?
Yes. But I mean, I usually go with, I mean, head choice is a big deal when it comes to tuning. I like coated ambassadors a lot. That's like a starting point for me with almost all my drums. But every now and then on a snare drum, I'll use the coated CS dot. Every now and then I'll use coated emperors on the toms. And occasionally I'll go with clear tom heads, clear emperors, or even clear pinstripes if I want to go for some kind of 80s pop tom sound. So sometimes I'll change my approach just by changing the tom heads, and all of a sudden I'm playing differently, you know? But in tuning, yeah, sometimes I do the super low thuddy thing. Sometimes I do more low medium tuning with some gaff tape to prevent the ringing, the excess overtones, I should say. And snare drum pitch is big when it comes to touring. Like sometimes people like really low chunky snares, and sometimes people don't and they want it to cut. So I'll play any snare drum range depending on the style of music. I often discuss that with the front house engineer, what they like. Like I have one engineer I work with on a lot of tours, and he likes like a 5.5 by 14-inch snare drum tuned kind of medium high, no muffling. Wow. And sometimes I'm like, wow, in my in-ears, I'm like, wow, that is really pong. but he's like, don't touch it out front. It's incredible. I'm like, okay, all right. You know, and I'm like, whoa, that's like, so I put a little bit of tape. I try not to tell him. And he's like, hey, the snare drum sounds dead today. Did you put any tape on him? I did. Okay. And I take it back off again. But that's him. So he knows how to get a good sound. I subbed for Stacey Jones for a while in Miley Cyrus, and that engineer loves the deepest snare sound you can get out of a drum. I sat down on the drum, and it was like, like the heads are floppy and the snares are floppy. I'm like, oh, this must have been in someone's like the back of their pickup truck in the sun for 3 days. Right. So I started to tune it up, and the engineer's like, don't touch it. It sounds incredible. I'm like, really? But he's got it dialed in the front house, and it does sound incredible. The guy's Paul Hager is an amazing engineer. So therefore, you have to, as a drummer, you're providing the drum beats, but you're not really totally in charge of what it sounds like through the PA. That guy has his EQs, his effects, whatever he's doing, his gates, his compression. So you have to have a communication with them. So that's all live. Studio, you asked about too. That's a whole other thing. You know, drum head wise, tuning wise, you have to, and it depends on the room, depends on the style of music, and it really depends on, are you favoring the close mics? Are you favoring the distant mics? You know, a drum sound a certain way when you use rooms and overheads, and another way when you're using primarily the little mics that are about an inch off the drum head. It's a totally different thing. I mean, and you can, if you don't know anything about miking, you can just notice that you walk into a big room and watch a drummer play, and he's going, boosh, ga, boo, 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 ga. You're like, oh, that sounds incredible. Well, that's the room sound. And then if you go and you put your ear an inch away from the snare drum and he plays the same beat, you're like, oh my God, you're killing me. That's what a mic is doing. You know, would you put your ear an inch off the top of the snare drum rim and listen to rim shots all day long? That's practically suicidal. But that's what close mics do. So you have to treat those differently, and you have to tune differently if that's how you're going to mix with those microphones. And that's where all the weird tunings and drums and treatments and heads and, you know, muffling comes into play.
What about the bass drum? Do you muffle it differently for touring versus studio? Yeah,
I would say so. The idea of a big wide open bass drum live hardly ever works. I won't say never, but never. No, I wouldn't say never, but almost never. And if you show up to a tour with a 24-inch bass drum with no holes in it, there will be engineers like taking bows and arrows and like shooting them at your head. They do not like that. And there's a reason why, because it reverberates to the point where they cannot control it. They cannot, there's just so much vibration in the room that even if you're not playing the bass drum, it's still going, and they have to do all sorts of weird things, gates and EQs to make it sound decent. And what would fix all that is just putting a packing blanket or a pillow in the bass drum. And I think the idea of cutting a hole in the front or not cutting a hole in the front is not as important as putting some type of blanket or pillow in the bass drum. Because sometimes you can pull off a no-hole front head that has a little bit of stuffing in it, and it'll still work. But just a ringy bass drum, which sounds so amazing in your studio or in your practice space, it hardly works when it's mic'd up and going through a PA. Now, some people might be hearing this and thinking I'm nuts, but this is just from me trying to do it and engineers trying to strangle me. So I feel like live, having a hole and having a little bit of stuffing that makes the bass drum sound a little controlled gives them the ability to crank the kick and make it super thuddy. Would you like the engineer to turn your bass drum off live because they can't control it? No. You want them to crank your drums. And the best way they can crank their drums is if they're slightly deader. The deader your drums are, the louder they can turn your drums, which is, that kind of 70s thuddy sound. They're dead, so you can crank them in the mix. They might not be as fun to play, but sorry, it's what's going to sound good out front. I've had engineers debate over the size of the hole you cut in the front of the head and where to cut it. Center hole or offset hole, 5-inch, 6-inch, 7-inch. Seriously, I've had this debate. Like, can we try a 7-inch hole instead of a 5-inch hole? I'm like, let's do it. And there's a reason why, because the amount of air that comes out of the hole is different. Is it, is it going like through a tiny hole, or is it kind of going through a bigger hole? And it's a different sound, and it affects the front head differently. I thought it was crazy talk. I'm like, this guy is just messing with me. But you when you start to change the location and the size of the hole, you hear different sounds. It's either punchier or it's boomier or woofier. And then the kind of muffling you want to do. I'm a big fan of muffling I guess we're calling it the batter side of the bass drum more than the front head. I really think that having something laying on the beater side of your kick tightens things up. And then if you have a hole in the front head, you can have like just the sleeve of a t-shirt touching that, and that might be enough to stop it. It might give you that nice combination of attack, deadness, and a little bit of bonhomie ring still. So actually that's usually my go-to bass drum sound, is to have a little bit of muffling touching the batter side and barely anything touching the front head.
And what do you use? Like t-shirts, towels, blanket? What is your choice?
Everything. Anything I could find on the side of the stage, usually. Only because I often have to rent kits, rent backline. So I show up and I'm like, here we go. There's nothing in the bass drum. So I just start walking around the side of the stage looking for rags and things. I'm like, oh, there's someone's hoodies over here. I'll take that hoodie. And I just put the hoodie in the bass drum, and that works. I don't know. It all works. It's all different.
Yeah. All right. So let's build out some kits. So let's talk about the Morrissey kit. What did you add to your basic setup, and why was it added?
An SPDSX I added, both to check tempos, like as a count off tempo reference. I put all the songs in there in a set list, and there were like 100 songs I had to learn. So, and I had the BPM for every one of them in there. And then I had some samples in there. So that was on the left side. What else did I have? He wanted a gong bass drum for a couple songs. I had one of those, fortunately. And he wanted an actual gong for the end of a couple songs. And you would think it's just visual, but it actually, the end of this song ends with a gong, and this one ends with this roll. I'm like, cool, I have a gong, believe it or not. So I pull it out like once every 9 years. Let's do it. And then what else? Then I think about little things like, do I have enough sticks? I have 2 pairs of in-ear monitors, so make sure both of them are working. I have a little, what's called Vornado fan on the floor. I like so I don't get too sweaty during the gig. What else did I have? I think I had an extra cymbal. I added a China on the far right, and if I'm not mistaken, that was about it.
Okay. Now, what about the Perry Farrell setup?
Pretty much the same, minus the gong bass drum and the gong. I think I had. Oh no, I had electronics on that. I had. Roland's gonna hate me if I forget. I always forget the serial numbers for all this stuff. What's the little blue and black device they have that has? It's a trigger device. TM11R or something.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
D's. I cannot remember
trigger
model
module.
numbers. Yeah. It's not the tiny one that only had 2 inputs. It's the bigger one that has like 6 inputs. I had one of those because Perry loves like doing like spacey effects during the intros of songs. So I had to have all these dub delay sample sounds that I would go bo 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 bo, stuff like that for intro. So I had that around the kit with little pads, and then other than that, my regular setup: 2 snares, 1 up, 2 down, same cymbal setup. There was an SPDS-X on that too to play some sample one shots and things. I should say I always like having a double pedal just in case. So I have a DW 5002 double pedal, and my friends will look at me like, "You play double pedal?" I'm like, "Believe it or not, I always have a double pedal just in case." Just in case there's one time where they're like, "You need to do this little thing." I'm like, "Got it." Yeah.
Are you playing to clicks for those 2 particular gigs?
Mostly. I would say Perry Farrell about 50%, and Morrissey about 85%, 90% to click.
Is that coming through the SPDS, or is that coming from monitor mix?
Okay. A little bit different. The Morrissey thing, sometimes if there's no tracks, I'll just start a click on the SPDX on the metronome they have there, and I'll play along. No one else hears it. I just hear it, and I can either play and then shut it off or keep it on if I feel like I need it or it helps the song. But they also have tracks that the drum tech runs, which has its own click. So certain songs have loops or sequences. So then I'll cue him. Oh no, I have a foot pedal for that. So I'll tap the foot pedal and the tracks begin. It's just a stop and a start. And so there's a handful of songs where there's tracks coming out of a machine that have a click track. And then Perry Farrell, it's either the older material has no click. The Janes and the Porno for Pyro stuff has no click, and his newer stuff is coming out of Ableton.
Is it the same thing, you're starting and stopping, or is it coming in?
That they have an engineer running it, and he's like one of those, rocket scientists on the Ableton. So he knows more about that than I do. As far as, I mean, I know a lot, but he's the kind of guy who can do edits on the fly and everything. So I like having a second guy there, so I don't have to worry about it.
All right, let's talk about the big rig with Shakira. What does that involve?
That involves, again, imagine the same setup I just said for the last 2 artists, except now we're going to take a V drum set and intersperse it around the kit. So I don't have a V drum set like behind me, like Neil Peart style. I just take it off the rack, and I just stuff it around my drum set. So my bass drum has an electronic bass drum pedal right next to it. My floor toms have 2 floor tom pads right above them on a rack. My rack tom has a rack tom pad right to the next to it. My snare drum has a snare drum pad right to the left of it, so I can actually just, by moving 6 inches, I'm playing a electronic drum set or an acoustic drum set, or I can combine the 2. I could play an electronic kick drum with a real snare, or the other way around. So that's pretty much what it is. It's on a rack because there's a lot of little parts. I don't use a rack with anyone else. And also there's some percussion also thrown in there. Maybe some bongos, a doumbek, things like that, just for certain songs that she has. And the reason why that kit looks so outlandishly enormous is because I've been with her since 1998. And she really likes drums, and she really likes, exploring different kinds of drum beats and drum parts. So every tour, we're just adding more stuff. I'm like, I wish I didn't have to do it. I would show up with a bebop kit if I could, but she's like, oh, for this one, can you do this? Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I look at the drum tech. I'm like, how do we do this? What do we need to get? And so it just builds, because some of her material, some of her catalog is just rock pop. Like she likes Zeppelin, so I have to be able to cover a pseudo pop Zeppelin sound. And then some of the stuff is dance, so I have to have dance sounds, and some of the stuff is reggaeton, some of the stuff is super Latin, some of it is world percussion, and some of it is very pop. So I have to be able to kind of do all those sounds, and I don't want to have this Starship Enterprise looking drum set, but it turns out that way. It turns out that way because I want to keep my job, and that's what I need to provide. And try to.
Go ahead. Sorry, I mean to interrupt you.
I was just gonna say I try to play it because it's a lot to look at, so I try to play it very simply. I try not to overdo it by, going Mr. Octopus and hitting everything every song. I'm like, all right, for this song, I'm just playing kick, snare, hi-hat. And for this song, I'm playing all the electronics over here. And for this song, I'm playing this, which is funny because someone will see me play one song only. And they're like, why do you have all that stuff if all you're doing is playing the octopad? I'm like, well, that was that one song.
Right.
The one song, that's all I play. I don't hit everything on every song. I only hit that on that song. But the other songs, I'm playing brushes on the snare, and the other song I'm doing this. And it's just, she has just a ton of material. So depending on the set list, that will dictate what surfaces I'm hitting that night.
Do you control the sound changes, or is that coming off stage as well?
At the moment, I do it. I for the electronics, the samples, I run a laptop with battery 4 in it, and I just toggle through the set list. I have a different song with different samples in every song, so I just put it in set list order and just hit down, 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 and just go between the songs. And battery 4 from Native Instruments, that, as far as I can tell, doesn't take program changes. I've tried to figure it out. I think they've told me that you need to upgrade the contact if you wanted to do program changes. So I just got in the habit of just end the song, switch the kit, and then next, switch the kit. But I don't know. I should probably just use Ableton Drum Rack instead, because then I can have the guy running Digital Performer just send me program changes. I wouldn't have to deal with it. But I kind of like, is a weird old-fashioned sense of me that I kind of like being in charge of all the stuff going on in the drum riser. I don't want to think that I can't be in charge of my drum samples, that I have to wait for him to load in the next song before I can hear the sounds on the next song. I kind of like that I'm in charge of it.
Sweet, man. Well, I've only got one more question. What was your first snare drum?
First snare drum? Well, the one that jumps to mind is the Yamaha Black Beauty that was the Manu Katché signature series.
I know that drum.
It was, I think I got that in 1990, probably, at Sam Ash Music in Paramus, New Jersey. And I think that was the first drum I bought. I had a drum before that. If I think back, I had the one that comes with a Pearl export. I guess it's just a 6.5 by 14-inch steel, like cheap steel.
Yep.
That was my first kit. I got off a neighbor. So that was probably the first one I ever had. But the first one I bought was I worked at a gas station for like a year and a half, and then went down to Sam Ash and got myself a recording custom. And that was a snare drum I bought with that. And I used that drum for probably 6 years before I bought a second drum. Yeah. It was the only one I had.
Smart choice. How'd you know to pick that one? That's a great drum.
I don't remember. I remember liking Manu Katché because he played with Sting, but I think it was probably the salesman helped me out. I can't remember. He was a great guy too. I can't remember his name. Max, maybe. I can't remember. But he, I think he probably said, you can get this, or why not just get this? And it was a good drum. I remember it was a loud drum. It was loud. So I remember when I went to music school, I'd be playing, in small groups, and I had to really control that, because that was like ding, tick, ding, tick, ding, tick, ding, ding, ding. So I'm like, wow, you can't hit rim shots on that, because it had die-cast hoops on it too. So it was loud. And then when I was at school, at some point, a teacher sold me an old Superphonic that I started using too, which was a little softer, a little more forgiving. And those are my only two drums for years. I still have that Superphonic right there. That's on the shelf over there.
Nice. Whatever became of the recording customs?
I sold it. Oh no, the recording customs I have. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I still have those drums, and they're the red cherry color, like the Dave Weckl red. I still have them with clear pinstripes. It's a great kit. I used it forever, and I love the sound of that kit, but it has certain things it doesn't do. It doesn't bark. It doesn't bark or growl like a rock kit should. So I remember I started playing a lot of rock gigs, and I'm like, wow, this set is just a little too controlled. So then I would use anything else that would just go pow, pow, poo, pow, poo, because that kit is just too nice. It's so nice under microphones, right? So I put that kit away for years and years and years. And I only brought it out recently. I'm like, man, this is a nice sound. This is still, it's the pre-Yes Mount recording custom era, so it was, 1990, I think. I have like 8-inch tom, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 16.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever set them up all at the same time. And I'm going to do it this week, I think. But I've always just done like 2 up, 1 down. But I think I'm just doing it.
Bring back the 8, man. Make it cool again.
Yeah. I was at a Blue Man Group show in Vegas not too long ago, and their kit, my friend Vince Verderami plays in that band, and they have an 8-inch tom on their drum set, and it was cutting in the most amazing way. It didn't sound like fusion. It sounded like this awesome tribal pitches, and I'm like, man, we got to bring back the 8-inch tom, but tune it like higher, more like a bongo with sustain.
Okay.
And it was just a beautiful sound, like contrasting with just toms always sound like thugga, 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 thugga. They have this really high cutting like sound. I don't know. It made me think about that. Like, bring back the 8. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you hanging out for the hour plus. Is there anything that we should let people know about what you're going to be up to this year?
Nah.
Okay, perfect.
No, I don't know. I got some gigs with Perry Farrell and Morrissey coming up if the world doesn't implode.
Yeah.
And I still got a lot of fun drummer plus drummer projects in the works. A lot of guys who are collaborating. That's kind of fun. If anyone likes to check that stuff out. That's about it.
Yeah.
Just keep on keeping on.
It. Yeah, exactly. Well, all right. Thanks, Brendan.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me. And I love your podcast. I think you're a really, really good interviewer. And thanks for inviting me.
That's it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed my chat with Brendan, please head over to iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get this podcast. Drop a 5-star rating and review. That definitely helps spread the word and gets the show into the ears of more drummers around the world. And until next time, stay warm, and I'll see you then.